So what we have planned here is we have just about an hour, and we have 5 at the school. We have on with us virtually, we have Chris Stevenson, who is in North Carolina.
Or South Carolina.
South Carolina? Or are we on? North Carolina. And what we're going to do is, ahead of time, I sent everybody a set of questions, like 10 questions. And I said, pick some. And you get to talk for 5 minutes. Using some technology, I have a little timer here. Because when I talked to Chris, I was just going to talk to Chris briefly for what I thought was 5 minutes about setting up the technology. And an hour later, we got off the phone and I had a whole bunch of things for my trivia. So we're all going to talk for 5 minutes. You're going to go Chris, and then we're going to go chronologically. And they have the set of questions. We're not going to answer the same questions. So they got a list of 10 questions, and they're going to just talk for 5 minutes about some of those questions. Then, that's about 25 minutes. Then we'll let you guys ask some follow-up questions. Then we'll kind of, what we say is popcorn. So that means that one person might answer the question, or 2 people, but not necessarily everybody. Does that make sense? All right, so Chris said you're going to need a bullwhip to keep everybody in line to stick to their 5 minutes. So, Chris, are you ready?
As long as I get about 5, yes.
Okay, so at 4, I'll politely say 4 minutes. All right. Tell us about yourself and your time with Fayerweather from 70 to 76.
Okay, first thing I want to do is thank Ray for his indispensable help. He really did a great job, and he should I came to the school in 1969, which was its 2nd year, and it was a period of time, those of you who are old enough to remember, of national unrest about a lot of things. Nixon defeated Johnson in 68, and well, he defeated Hubert Humphrey, but there was a lot of upset, particularly in the South, about the civil rights legislation that Lyndon Johnson had achieved, but it was a time of unrest, and there was a special amount of unrest, the greatest that I had ever seen, about what was going on in schools. And there were a lot of very well-written books on that subject, and I thought I'd just name a few of them, because listen to the titles. The Disappearance of Childhood, How Children Fail, Teaching the Subversive Activity, The Underachieving School, and Death at an Early Age. Those were all powerful, big-selling book titles of considerable substance that captured the stress in the country about the school and about schooling. And at that time, there was a group of people in Cambridge, some educators and some parents, who wanted to form a school that would create a new paradigm for how schools might work. So that was the task. It was loosely based on the British primary model, which was had been recorded in the 1,000-page Plowden report, which showed great strides, great advances among school children in the primary and middle grades in England in the Midlands. And so, like many other American educators, I applied for a grant and went over and spent a month there. Most of that month was at one school, the Battling Brook County Primary School. It went through what we would call 6th grade. That school was achieving remarkable things with children who lived in what they call British housing estates. They were state-subsidized housing, children from families that were stressed for money. So it was very impressive to be there and see how civilized and how adept those children were. I got to spent a lot of time with 2 teachers, a husband-wife team named Pam and Peter Wosha, who later came to Fayerweather at my invitation to help us restart Fayerweather after an unfortunate first couple of years. in that classroom, I'll just tell you a little bit, but they had 75 children, ages 4, 5, 6, and 7. And during the period that I was there, Peter came down with the flu. So I helped out Pam for a few days. Then Pam came down with the flu. And the 75 children tolerated my presence, made me feel like I could be helpful and that I belonged. And I had some of the happiest teaching time in my life. What I wanted to bring from all of that experience and my background in the child development field were 3 things. One is, you may not have thought of this before, but between the ages of 5 and 14, we have 2 ages of reason that everyone passes through. And those of you who are parents may recognize that. The first, we called it the ages of literacy. And in the first age group, which is approximately 4 to 8, children engage language, not only in learning how to speak it with older, more skilled speakers, but learning how to write it and read it and use it for all of the wonderful purposes that it allows. The second age of reason comes at around age 11 for most children, 10 to 11, and goes through about age 14. And that's a period of time where cognitively, young people are able to learn by comparing and learn by analysis and learn by exchanges with classmates and with teachers. And it's a time where they can learn to think about their own thinking. And so it represents a sophistication which is there to be capitalized upon if you recognize it. In my next life, and when I was a college professor at the University of Vermont, I did research on this particular subject in which I videotaped interviews with the same child every year for 4 years. And my interview consisted of one question or one invitation, tell me about yourself. And when you look at the 4 successive interviews with individual children, it's pretty impressive how much they change, but also how much they stay the same. That's too subtle to get into today, but know that that is a period of enormous change which we can accommodate in many ways. The second thing that I wanted to focus on was Chris.
All right, Chris, I'm giving you your 4-minute warning, and we're at 6 minutes.
Okay.
So a couple more thoughts, and then we'll come back to it.
I'll see. We wanted to build curriculum around the interests of children. Instead of testing children to see what they know, we wanted to explore things that they had asked questions about. Most of the standardized tests don't ask them questions about things that they have solved on their own. But we found that with encouragement and a support system, students could achieve remarkable things. And in fact, I wrote a couple of books on curriculum integration. I'd be happy to see Paul once again if you're interested. The third thing and the final thing that I will say is that John Dewey told us, and we needed to follow his insight, that children are very capable of learning how to live democratically. Sometimes people in Vermont have said, well, it's like the Vermont town meeting, and I said, no, it's not. It's similar, but Vermonters could come down and see how children are handling democracy in their multi-age teams and learn a few things that would make it infinitely more efficient in the town meetings. So those were the 3 things that I was after. There was more, but 5 minutes. I at least got through those 3.
Back a little bit, and we're going to move over to Ted, who's going to do an interpretive dance, apparently.
It struck me that this might feel a little bit to you like old ball players getting together. There's a little bit of that. I should say that I have a kind of wider span than just being ahead here, so some of what I'm going to say will get conflated Chris hired me to teach here. And I was ahead and other things, and then my kids came here, and if you'll see, I had 2 tags, so my grandkids are still here. We used to say about Fayerweather that we were a school that thought first about how kids learn, and then how to teach. And sort of going from that, we would think really, it was very, very important that we had to sort of consider that kids' emotional life, the sort of feelings that brought to school were important, and we had to acknowledge them somehow. And some of the proudest moments I've ever seen at Fayerweather, proud of the school and proud of the teachers, is watching extraordinarily skillful teachers listening. Not talking, not preaching, but listening closely to kids. And so I think this helped build this kind of strong kind of sense in kids that I am seen here. This is an emotionally safe place. And we believed, and I think it's so that was a concomitant of learning, that you had to feel like, okay, I'm okay here. Now I can sort of tackle the cognitive stuff. And we got about that sort of by asking the question, how can we challenge these kids? What will be interesting to them? What will keep them kind of engaged? And in order to do that, we had classrooms that look a lot like what you see now. We were in an old building, so things were a little compressed. Lots of stuff happening. Kids working at different rates in different places in a classroom, doing different things at different times. We're here in Cambridge. And he's kind of a combative. I said, okay, what's the story here? Like, come on, tell me what's the story. I said, I'm not quite sure I know what you mean. He said, I have these 4 or 5 kids in my class. This is in the 80s, so they're skaters. They're sort of punkers. They wear leather. But these kids come to my class on time. They are quite literally awake as well as intellectually awake. They engage me and the subject. They ask me great questions. They ask me for extra work, and they can engage me in a way that's sort of in a mutual, respectful way. What's the deal? And of course, the 4 or 5 kids were from Fayerweather. And I think that's what we were after. Not to sort of turn out kids who were, oh, okay, I did great on the test, but kids who would really engage and be active and alive in their learning. And we used to hear that a lot from schools. Wow, these are really great kids. They can meet adults quite respectfully and evenly. And often these kids would end up being kind of leaders in their school. I want to get back to the sort of emotional kind of thing, because I think this has always been a school that has found time to sort of see and help kids see their emotions. So I'm going to tell one story before I end. And this is a story that I like. There are 2 stories in this, actually. It's a story sort of from my time, and it's a story from last year. And I like this connection. I hope you will too. So I was either, I forget, maybe I was the head, and we were in an all-school meeting, very similar to what you witnessed today, you saw today. And except in the old building, we were much more pressed in and compact and smaller. And whoever was sort of leading the meeting, like Ed or me or something, was going along, and suddenly a kid burst into tears. Just burst into tears. We stopped. Everybody stopped. Not I, but one of the older kids walked back to the kid. What's up? Everybody else is waiting. A minute goes by. 2 minutes go by. The older fellow found out that the kid had lost a toy or something like that. He was just devastated. So he said, this guy has lost his toy. And then whoever it is, he said, okay, we'll all look for it. Isn't that right? The kid said, yep, that's right. And we started back in again. And often people ask me, sort of, what connects the old Fayerweather and the new, or the present? So last year I came to see my grandkids at a talent show. And a girl from the 1st or 2nd grade got up to sing and was petrified. And just so, she had stage fright. the show stopped. The show stopped. Her teacher came up and talked with her. Okay, yeah. Then her teacher turned to all of us and said, well, we've had stage fright, haven't we? And we said, yes. So imagine, it's as if all this stopped so that you and I could work out whatever we had to do. And then, the girl said, okay, I think I can do it. The show started again. She sang beautifully. We all applauded. So there are things that would be maybe a fun question for you to ask. Sort of what are the threads that kind of weave through this time that are similar? Anyhow, it's a great pleasure to be here with my mentor, Chris, and my other friends.
Thanks.
That was lovely. When Ted left and went to India with his family in 1990, I came from Shady Hill School, and I inherited or just found here a wonderful classroom culture. Ted was a teacher here. I never was. I learned more about teaching from the faculty at Fayerweather than from any other part of my life. But I found a couple of challenges here, and one was that we no longer fit in the building that we were in. And we had to move the unit, the 7th and 8th graders, off campus into a separate and disconnected space. Not a good long-term solution. And another challenge was that there was kind of a division in the faculty, or a distinction in the faculty between head teachers and assistant teachers, which was reflected in what some thought was an unhealthy way in compensation. And the biggest issue really was that assistant teachers taught 4 days a week and were 80% time, but you needed to be 85% time to qualify for health insurance benefits. And so we had in my first year, I think, we had a tussle over that and restructured the benefits so that the head teachers no longer got 100% of their health care benefits paid for, but the assistant teachers did begin to get some of their health care benefits paid for. It was I know that doesn't sound like a terribly interesting challenge, but it was a big one. The most important people in the school were the head teachers, and some of them were very unhappy about losing their 100% health care benefit. But the school, it was becoming clear, because I don't know if you remember in 1990, the costs of health benefits were beginning to rise very rapidly, health insurance, and it just wasn't sustainable. And so that was one challenge, and I have no idea long-term how that worked out or what the consequences of it were, but maybe I'll learn something. The other challenge, the space challenge, was enormous. The school had more younger students than older students, and as the younger students got older, there wasn't room for them. And I spent a lot of my time as head looking for a building that could house the school and figuring out how we could afford that and make a transition. And that was a problem that did not get solved in my tenure, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Susan about that challenge.
Well, it is fascinating for me to hear Ted talk and Scott talk. Can you hear me? Okay, so it was was fascinating to hear Ted, because I'm going to pick up exactly where he left off. Both the space, I came to the first graduation after I had been hired that June, and there were 4 graduating students from the unit, 4. And I realized that there must be, I didn't know really anything, but I did know that it was very problematic what had happened to the unit class, because they had been separated. And there also had been a study committee, because there was so much tension. Some parents wanted to cut the unit, and some parents didn't. And in typical Fayerweather fashion, a study committee was formed, and they spent the year, and they decided that we had to find space in the building, and that the unit needed to be kept as a part of the school. And so that was what I began with. So I could not have moved this building and I spent hours with members of the building committee looking for buildings. And I spent hours thinking about how to rearrange the space. In fact, we moved the kindergarten out of the main building to the little house off the playground in order to open up more space. And I moved my space, and the library very willingly crammed themselves into the former office of the head of school. So there was an incredible willingness to work with me and the board members who were on the building committee to try to make this work until we could find a site for the building. So I'll say a little bit more about the role of parents here, because I could not have done my job without the parents on these several committees that gave an extraordinary amount of time working with me to find solutions to the human resource situation, to find solutions to the building situation, and of course, to figure out how to finance the school. The finance committee was a place of very heated discussions. Mark will remember, he was on the committee at the time. Anyhow, the other major thing that I was trying to figure out was to figure out how to balance the extraordinary autonomy of the teachers, which was part and piece of the culture of the school, as Ted has described, and how to understand how to get the experience of the children as students to be a consecutive one. By that I mean, what were the children learning? And were they relatively or not at some point in their school year learning similar things, so that when the 3-4s went up to the 5-6s, there was some similarity, some commonality and collaboration in what they understood. And so that took a lot of discussion with the faculty, because it was very important to me. I had come out of a public school that was like a military academy. That was relevant. And before that, I had been head. So that took a lot of discussion. And they may still be working on it now, because it's a very hard problem. It's not a simple problem. There were some wonderful curriculum themes taught, and then you couldn't teach other things. You have to be really thoughtful about how you plan for curriculum. We also worked on what Ted was talking about, was the teacher, assistant teacher, because there was not only inequality in the financial benefits, but there was a lot of tension around who had been hired to be assistant or associate teachers. Some people had college degrees, and some people were from the community. Very interesting, less experience in the classroom, or no experience at all. So that led to teams that were unequal in that sense of sharing load. So we worked, I think there were some teachers involved, in developing a plan where the assistant teacher would have to have or would be working toward a degree. and that we thought we would give them equal status and gradually increase their salaries over a 3-year time. I'm not absolutely sure, Dina could look this up in the files. I'm not sure exactly how it worked out financially, but it was definitely a move toward making the less experienced person a teacher, and also compensating them because they had less experience, so they were not making the same pay as head teachers. And of course, our plan to train them and have them leave Fayerweather never worked out, because most of them wanted to stay and teach at Fayerweather. So that part of the plan wasn't successful. We were actually trying to do a professional development thing with the assistants. Finally, I wanted to say, Ed asked one question. I was very involved in the internal workings of the school, but there was one event, as shocking to you as it was to every school in the country, which was 9/11. And I remember that time and the weeks that followed. Of finding parents so anxious. We led workshops with social workers every morning, I think for 2 weeks, just to have a place where parents could come and see each other and talk about what this event would mean in the lives of their children, and what it would mean in all of our lives, really. It continues. But that was the beginning of what we're living with. And it was shocking, it was terribly shocking to everybody. We even had a terrific professional development day in which we got a Muslim professor to come and talk to us about the history of Islam. Hold my mic up? Okay. So I think the last thing I want to talk about is the role of parents here. Because, as I said earlier, and I learned this because after I left Fayerweather, I was an interim head. So I saw a lot of other boards, and I saw a lot of other parent groups. And I was startled at the poor functioning of the board and the real inability of parents. They were interested in their children, but they had nothing of the support structure that this school had. So it was, from my point of view, the finding of this building is as much a part of the building committee's role as my role, because I spent hours traveling around with Fred Mueller looking at sites. And it was with Fred that we actually found this building. And I remember when we found it, a chill went over me. I just looked at it from the side there, and I knew that it was the building. It was incredible. And so the parents were extraordinarily generous. The Landers had bought the original home. And so the bank was incredibly helpful. But it was the parents who, both financially and with their time, gave and created this.
Ironically, as the youngest in school, I have reading glasses and notes. Some of the questions that I wanted to, I'm going to fill in a little bit. So Susan the school moved to this current location in 99. So you were in the other school for a while and then came over in 99. When I came, Susan and the community had done a lot of heavy lifting to raise more money to do an expansion. When we got here, we rented about a third of the space. And I came in and raised a little bit more money, and then we expanded. When I also got here, we were close to our 40th, and Chris mentioned Peter and Pam, who were some of the original teachers who came over from England during our 40th, and they're going to come for our 50th in the spring. And one of the things I'm most proud about the school, when you hear about the sense of the school that Ted Halstrom talks about, is when people went in our 40th anniversary, when people came back, they would say, even though it's a completely different building and a completely different group of people, it still feels the same. Somebody said, I can smell it. So there's a sense of the kind of bringing, no one's used the word progressive education, that progressive education 2017 still, we've been able to modernize it, but still keep the essence of what the school is. What attracted me, I came from across the country. I came from Seattle, Washington. My kids were going into first grade and fourth grade at the time. So it was a big deal for us to like move across the country. Like it wasn't just a job. This was going to come. My kids were going to be educated here, and which they were. And so for me, I remember when I came and I was interviewed and I saw all school meeting where the rock bands play, and I had that same chill. Like, wow, this is a place where it's like a different kind of feeling about empowering kids. And so I was attracted to school because of that, like kind of the energy that you guys are talking about. There's some kind of energy in it. And when I was, I had been a teacher for a while, for 10 years, and then I had been in these situations where there was either really strong faculty or really strong administration. It was either like I'd been in union schools, and I was like, as a head of school, there has to be a place where you can find a balance. And this seemed like, it, as you guys are talking about the power of the teachers, and you probably glossed over some of the stories I've heard about the tensions there. So I said, all right, how can we enact that part? How do you empower the teachers to teach kids, but also create a sustainable culture where you're not going to burn people out, where, and so this seemed like there was all that energy to do that. So my focus, one of the things that I've done is I say I brought the school from adolescence to maturity in a lot of ways. So we, the work of the board became more sophisticated. We've become, this is a school because we care a lot about social justice and equity, that fundraising was, we didn't want to talk about that, but now we talk about that and we've significantly raised funds, but done it again in keeping with our, the school ethos and what's important. So finding those balances. So, so I think now the school is, I think we said it was started at 76 kids, we're now at 195. And the unit was, you said, at 4. Now we graduate consistently 24 kids. So now we're 50 years old. We've been able to kind of permanently say that this isn't an experiment anymore from 1967, but that we've been able to systematize certain things, but then keep the fluidity at the same time of the kind of the heart of the school. One of the things I'm most proud of is actually the playground. If you came to Grandparents' Special Friends Day, I don't know, the playground's maybe 4 years old. It used to be just all wood chips, and we went through a process with the parents and the kids to renovate it. And one of the things, again, you'll hear these themes echo, is when we said, well, what do you want in the playground? The word danger came up. We want danger. And I said, well, talking to our insurance companies, maybe we'll use the word challenge. But the reason I'm most proud of the playground space is because that sense of childhood and risk, and the kids can go out there and engage in all those things of like, what does it mean to interact with people, and how do you create games? And I still think we have that many places don't have that. Some of the challenges is, when I was here, we had 2 tragedies. We had an accident with a bunch of people overseas, and incredibly, they were all able to come back. In some of them in pieces at the time, but now they're all whole. And then we also had a death of a teacher here. And that reminds me a little bit again of those the 9/11 stories of how we came together as a community to pull together and like kind of work that out. Because when you had a death of a teacher, at the time there was a lot of like, how are we going to protect 3- and 4-year-olds from talking about it? And the answer is you couldn't. Just like in 9/11, you couldn't not talk about it. It was out there in the world. And so we had to figure out how to have conversations, because you might have a sibling who was, in that classroom, and then there was just conversation flowing. So we brought in a lot of experts, and we really trained ourselves on how to bring ourselves through that. So it's probably one of the most challenging times, but also some of the things that I think I'm most proud of as a community, of how we went through that. And I think I'll stop there. So we'll open it up to questions. We're incredibly right on time, 20 minutes left for questions. Yes, and let's, I think I'm going to take one mic, give my mic out in the audience, and then we'll just share a mic if we need to.
This is on. So this is a remarkable opportunity because you've got 50 years of changes in school and some people that are clearly highly focused and knowledgeable on the topic. My question, so I became a teacher initially when I was in 1966, and I've been in education sort of ever since then. My question is, if you take sort of the first 25, 30, 35 years of academic curriculum,
The bad name of progressive ed is, oh, it's just open-ended, you do whatever you want. So I think we spent a lot of time saying, no, there is a very specific curriculum, but we're engaging the kids in that and trying to show in progressive, the opposite, progressive teachers don't like the word to use rigor, because that's like counter. And I would say that these are intertwined. It's not one or the other, that you can have kids deeply, I mean, that's what Ted said about kids can be deeply engaged in the work and it can be difficult and challenging. So I think those are themes that have come through.
I notice that from your perspective, I'm on the left side of the stage here, and you'll get from what I'm about to say. And this reflects, you have to take this conceptually, a much earlier time in the school's history. And I think the issues that both Susan and Ed addressed were real in the old school. It used to be the cliche is, oh, Wales again? Right, so there was, that's an extreme. It was never quite that bad, but there was sort of some of that which was quite rightly kind of addressed. I can remember being asked, why aren't you giving a history class? Why don't you give them sort of American history from sort of Mayflower to the Civil War or something like that? And I said, well, first place, I don't think they're quite developmentally ready for that, but I want to tell you something else, and this is perhaps describing the very best curriculum, among the best curricula that came out of Fayerweather. Nick and, Nick's co-teacher, I guess.
Claire?
No. Isabel, thank you. Nick and Isabel were teaching 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And they conceived a kind of study of Boston Harbor. This was extraordinary. They went on tugboats. They interviewed the woman who heads the fish pier, or headed at that time, the woman who headed the fish pier in Boston. It was, they went to the airport and they talked to Massport, and it was just an extraordinary thing. So these kids, what I described is that they got very deeply, but they had a sense of, oh, history, how the world works, is something that I can understand, and I can have a sort of lively relationship with. Now the challenge for us was, and I'm not sure we always met it, is sort of how do you fill in the holes? And that's a real question, but we were determined to answer that question in the context that kids felt like they were engaged and sort of not in charge of their learning, but agents in their learning. So these kids, imagine, had written, actually this curriculum ended up in Massport, this fabulous, math, it's wonderful stuff. And that gave them a lot of sense of ownership. I think the question always is a kind of tension in this kind of school. And you hear some of it here, and it's kind of, I think, a fun kind of thing to think about. Anyhow, that's my 2 minutes.
Yep, why don't we hear from Mike? Okay.
I'm wondering, each one of you heads, have you kept in touch with graduates from when you were here, and what are they doing? What kind of work are they doing?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of them are teachers. A lot of them are teachers. And some are also, you would add others, folks in the arts, I think. Yeah, what is it? The thing that pleases me most is when, to be honest with you, when I hear grads say, oh yeah, I'm a teacher. I think that's a good sign.
So that's a planned question because it's the 50th, what we've done, and we've gone back and we've interviewed we found some of our oldest graduates, and we've had alums interview them, young alums, like kids in high school and college, interview alums who are in their 30s and 40s, and over the year we're going to be putting them up on our website. We have people who are doctors. We have the guy who's building the San Francisco Giants Stadium. He's like a developer. We have a lot of people who are in the arts and in education. But I think it really runs the gamut, I mean, across the range. One of the things that, and the questions is, what are the attributes of our graduates? And I had written down, they're resourceful, you saw public speaking, our kids feel very confident in themselves. There's a lot of sense of self-advocacy and ability to understand themselves as a learner. And that's one of the themes when we always go back to the graduates. I always back to this tension of, is it academically rigorous enough? I always want our graduates to say, oh, I was like incredibly academically rigorous. And they said, that didn't really matter. I mean, the people from 40 years ago, they said, I learned how to learn, and I really knew I could learn as a learner, and I was really engaged in that. One of my favorite stories, secondhand, was somebody was applying to MIT math program as going to graduate school, and the person said, well, where did you learn your math? They were being interviewed. And they said, Fayerweather. So they didn't name their high school or their college. They named their elementary school about how they learned to think mathematically, not about, you know, so.
One story that I heard from a graduate of Fayerweather, we had some alumni come back and talk to the unit, I think, and one of the graduates from Ted's time in the school said, we were never learning how to ... When we were writing, we were writers. And when we were doing art, we were artists. And we had a sense that our work was serious and was taken seriously.
I think for us, because of the history of people not really understanding what it meant to have an open plan school or an integrated curriculum, or even the term progressive is misunderstood, as Ed mentioned earlier. Just in the conventional world of parental expectations, our parents and the parents that were prospective parents were very interested in what were the high schools that our unit students would get into. It was a very, very big issue. It was a kind of a proving ground of, were they going to get into all of these? Well, now many, many of the kids are going to the public high school, but when I was head, a majority of the graduates were going to other independent secondary schools. So it was like a minor college education application process. It was tense. So I knew that we had finally made the grade. This will resonate, I think, with Dina, was when the admissions office from Concord Academy called me up and said, we'd love to come and visit. We like your graduates so much. So now, I knew the world was different then, but it was a very competitive world, and that's all I needed to know, that we were fine, and we were going to continue being fine, even wherever the graduates would go to school. It was a very strange how one unique call can make confirm what you know about a whole lot of students.
I'm going to tell a story that's going to embarrass somebody in the audience. I'm going to tell Hannah's story, and if I get it wrong, I will. So we're in Cambridge, and as we got kids sort of close to college age and school age, people would say, well, where are our kids going to college? I said, well, we have one kid at Harvard. Oh, they said, that's right. I said, yes, but listen to this story about it. So Hannah was taking a visual arts course with some sort of kooky guy. Do I have it right? And this guy, if you can believe it, asked his students to buy a chicken. You used to be able to buy live chickens down on Cambridge Street here, and bring it and then kill it and represent it in some way. Not as an alive chicken, but a dead chicken.
It was a sculpture class.
Sculpture?
Yeah.
Thank you. Guess who was the one student that said, I'm not doing it. And guess where she went to school? Here. smart enough to get into Harvard, and smart enough to be a wonderful teacher here still, but also with a sense of right and wrong, and the strength to say, not me.
Other questions out there? Somebody up front here. Raise your hand and Dorla will bring you a mic. We're recording this session, so it's also good to hear the mic so that we have the question.
Thank you, first of all. This is amazing, and congratulations on your 50th anniversary, and it's wonderful to have all your perspectives. We've heard some of the different terms, progressive, et cetera. What today would you say are the key mission points of the school and how that then gets implemented? Thank you.
Sure. So when I'm talking to prospective families, I talk about three things. Progressive ed, which is this broad umbrella term about, it's not, and I say it's not progressive politics, even though we're left-leaning. It's progressive is really how do you think as an adult to understand how a kid is thinking? How do you unlock their learning? And progressive really looks at that. So it's not this rote memorization, but how do you engage kids? That's progressive education. I still think that's alive and well. The second thing is diversity, which is a big umbrella word, anti-bias, social justice, and that's something that, it's interesting, we haven't talked a lot about that, but has become more part of the school over time. So this is a school that thinks a lot about all those aspects of, we've become a racially more diverse school over time. We think a lot about the socioeconomics. Actually, this year, out of a $6 million budget, we're have $1 million worth of scholarship money, which is a lot for a school this size. And we really get kids to enact that. I can give a story in a second. And then the last one is community, this parent involvement. So we're not a school that has ivy growing up the side of our building, and we're not saying we've always done this the same way for 150 years. But I say we're a great school, we get better from parent ideas. And so we're very open to saying, hey, come challenge what we do and let's engage in that conversation. Let's see about how we can improve and get better. So I think you have to be a very confident school to be able to invite